With the Netrunner World Championship just 3 weeks away, it's time for me to lock in my decks and figure out what I'm going to be playing at the event. The best way to do this is of course to test the decks in the field, making sure that they perform against actual competitive decks in a real world environment. Unfortunately, there aren't going to be any large in-person tournaments between the most recent ban list, Unshackling Creative Commission, and the World Championship. Fortunately, an online series of tournaments known as the Online Showdowns was hosting an event that was shaping up to be its largest tournament ever. And in fact, the World Showdown 2025 ended up being the third largest online Netrunner tournament ever, being beaten only by the Online World Championships that were held in 2020 and 2021 when in-person tournaments weren't able to take place. In order to get ready for this event, I decided to sleeve up my decks and go to locals. I begin by sleeving up my Corp deck, Assured Destruction. This deck was created by Lifeline of the Scrubs testing group and is based on assembling a powerful kill combo that can lay down 8 to 12 damage and execute the runner in one fell swoop. To understand the combo, you first have to understand the card Ob Super Heavy Logistics Extract Export Excel. This identity's ability allows you to trash your own cards in order to tutor other cards from your deck, with the requirement that the card you grab costs exactly 1 credit less than the cost of the rezzed card you trashed. This is used to enable us to very quickly assemble some of the onboard pieces required for pulling off the combo. The full combo begins by playing Nano Management, allowing us to take a 5-click turn. Next, we have to play Mutually Assured Destruction. This allows us to blow up our board in exchange for putting tags on the runner. Our goal is to land 2 tags on them and to trash either a rezzed 4 cost or a rezzed 3 cost. The way the rest of the combo plays out depends on if we trashed a 4 cost or a 3 cost during the combo. If we trashed a 4 cost, we have to grab a Bass Cheraboga from the deck and then use it to gain an additional click. This brings us back up to 2 clicks, which we can use to play End of the Line and then End of the Line, landing 8 damage and killing the runner. If we trashed a 3 cost card, we're going to grab Wage Workers from the deck. Then we'll play our first End of the Line. This, in combination with Nano Management and Mutually Assured Destruction, is our third basic play action this turn, giving us an additional click from Wage Workers, which we can use to play the second End of the Line, putting down 8 damage. All in all, the combo requires 4 specific cards in hand, 2 rezzed cards on the table, one of which must be either 3 or 4 cost, and either Wage Workers or Bass Cheraboga still being in our deck, corresponding to the rezzed cost of one of the cards we're going to trash. We also need 14 credits to be able to afford all the cards we're going to play. The rest of the cards in the deck are built around setting up the combo, or avoiding losing the game before you're able to perform it. The agenda suite consists of 7 agendas, the minimum number it's possible to run currently in Ob, 3 Basalt Spire, which, if we score, allow us to set up the combo much easier, requiring 1 fewer End of the Line in our hand, 3 copies of SDS Drone Deployment, the only available defensive 5/3, and 1 copy of Above the Law, which we can use to trash the twinning, or any other important resource that looks like it's going to allow the runner to win the game. In terms of money, we're running 3 copies of Extract, 3 copies of Hedge Fund, 1 copy of Key Performance Indicators, and 1 copy of Mindscaping, which can act either as early money or as an alternative to End of the Line if we're able to land 3 tags and are willing to reduce the amount of damage we do to 7. We also run a Wall-to-Wall, a Regolith Mining License, and 3 copies of Anthill Excavation Contract. The Anthills also noticeably double as 3-cost Reservoirs, allowing us to trash them to fetch Wage Workers in the combo. In terms of ice, we're running 2 Kessleroids, 3 Mascarovkas, and a Tree Line to put our wall-to-wall counters on, a single Afshar, 2 Descent, 2 Stavkas, 2 Tides, and a Winchester. The Mascarovkas and Avshar act as 3 costs that we can trash to fetch Wage Workers, and the Tree Line, Stavka, and Winchester act as 4 costers that we can trash to fetch Bass. We also run a copy of Mavirus, which can be very helpful against Virus Synergy decks, and is a trashable 3 cost. This can notably be trashed to instant speed through its own ability, allowing us to set up some lines that wouldn't be possible just relying on Mutually Assured Destruction. Rounding off the deck, we have 3 copies of Spin Doctor to play Keep Away with the agendas, and 3 copies of Pivot to act as additional copies of any combo pieces we're missing. With my Corp deck fully sleeved, it's time to move on to the runner deck I'm bringing to the event. The deck in question is an Arisana deck based on the principle that we don't need any real breakers. The goal of the deck is to eventually set up a board state where we're able to use Conduit 6 times in 1 turn minimum, but ideally more than that, and to see effectively the number of cards we would see on a deep dive turn before that card was banned, but requiring a bit more elbow grease. This deck was built by Toron as a contribution to the Save Arisana Committee, a group of like-minded players working together to try and figure out how to make Arisana not completely awful in the current format. The deck relies on the card Poison Vial, which allows you to break 2 subroutines on a piece of ice that you've already broken 1 subroutine on. By combining this with Slap Vandal, we're able to break up to 3 subroutines on any piece of ice, assuming we can manage the ice's strength correctly, which for all ice in the current format is enough for us to get through. We're going to use this in combination with Pishasaur and Conduit to attempt to run 6 times in a single turn, seeing 6 cards minimum on R&D, but every card we steal or trash will extend this by 1. In addition to this, we can use the card Illumination once the Pishasaur's returned to our hand to put it back on the table. And if we either installed our Breakers, our Conduit, and our Pishasaur on a previous turn, or put them down clicklessly during this turn with tools like Simulchip or Prognostic Q-Loop, we're able to use our Arasana ability to install the Pishasaur as well, potentially netting us up to 8 or 9 runs on a single turn. In terms of money, the deck is on 3 copies of Creative Commission, 3 copies of Spec Work, 2 copies of DZMZ Optimizer, 2 copies of Environmental Testing, 1 copy of Azimat, which will help during our dive, and 3 copies of Coalescence, which also serve as targets for the Spec Work. We can also play Illumination in the early game rather than on our dive turn as a form of early cash injection, as well as to save us some clicks on installing cards. In addition to all of this, we have a single copy of Urban Art Vernissage, which acts as an economy tool for the purposes of installing cards and, importantly, allows us to maneuver around all of our Trojans, letting us use them to pressure remotes early without them being locked up and unable to move on to R&D when we're ready to do the dive. For card draw, we have the aforementioned Spec Works, as well as 3 copies of Dr. Nuka and 2 copies of Lilypad. We also have 2 copies of Prognostic Q-Loop, which acts as pseudo card draw, as it allows you to see and install cards without them ever passing through your hand. For our Breaker Suite, we have got 3 copies of Slap Vandal, 1 copy of Phasarum Entangler, and 2 copies of Hush. This is important to allow us to manage the strength on Advanceable Ice, as well as to get through Trojan hate cards like Hammer and Samuxama. Rounding out the deck, we have 3 copies of Muse and Self-Modifying Code to act as tutors, and 3 copies of Simulchip to act as recursion. With my deck all sleeved up, I decided it was time to head into Reading. There, I'd be heading to my local game store, Eclectic Games, in order to get some practice in against members of my local meta. My first game was against Lander, playing a Control Magdalene deck. I kept, he mulled, and the bad news was I drew into a Wage Workers. I emptied out a Regolith while he played setup, and then eventually a Cataloger comes down on around turn 4 and steals a Basalt Spire off the top of my deck. I used this to add Spin Doctor back to my hand, which was trashed earlier, and is going to let me get that Wage Workers back in my deck. And to decide the second card I'm putting back for me, I immediately draw into the Bastiraboga. Drawing both combo pieces that you need in the deck like this is brutal, but fortunately I have the way to play out of it. A turn later I draw the Nano Management, and now I'm 1 card away from having combo fully set up. The Spin Doctor draws me into the final piece of the combo, as well as a 3-cost Anthill that I can use to prime it. I jam Anthill in the server, and if it goes uncontested, next turn I'll be able to lay the full combo down on the table. Knowing I'm so close to the end of the game, I extract off an SDS drone deployment to make sure I'll have the money to pay for it, even if I have to res some ice. Lander plays Setup Magdalene for another turn, and then on my next turn, I flip up the Anthill and lay the 4-card combo on the table, dealing 8 damage to the runner with no kill protection in hand such as a Steel Skin and no stone ships on the table. Taking game 1 on turn 6 and overall giving us an excellent showing for this deck. Game 2 we swap sides and Lander starts by jamming behind ice. I open by face checking into the tree line, followed by Nuka Nuka, drawing me the Illumination that lets me empty out my hand. Getting down an SMC, a Simulchip, and a Coalescence. I trash a Hollow Man off the top of the deck, hopefully slowing down Lander's game plan. Jumping ahead a few turns, Lander's got his board set up and I need to get back in this game. So we click a newly installed Nuka twice and we draw a load of cards. We're going to play Illumination. This is going to slow down our final combo turn as we won't be able to use it to reinstall Pishasaur, but the value of getting so many cards on the table can't be overstated. Lander hard pays for a Beowhack and I crack the SMC we put down earlier to grab a Phasarum Entangler and get through it for 5 credits. I get down an Airblades, a Coalescence, and I park a Hush on the tree line, getting it down to Strength 6 through Isaac to allow me to slap Vandal through it later and present a credible possibility of contesting the remote. For my final click, I get down a UAV, which combined with the Hush is going to give us a valuable economic engine for most of this game. I discard a Conduit at the end of my turn, knowing that with 2 Simulships on the table, I can bring it back for only 1 credit, 0 with DZMZ, at a later date when I'm ready to set up the combo. Eventually Lander cracks the Charlotte and jams in the remote. I'm not able to effectively contest it and play more setup, and he scores a Basalt Spire. A short while later, I manage to get a Q-Loop down and run Arcades for Q-Loop information. Lander's forced to rescue something that he hid in there, back to his hand using a Basalt counter, and so I run back on HQ. Lander reses an Aket, which I comfortably slap through, and I grab a Basalt Spire off the 1 in 6 in hand, presumably the one that Lander added back to hand, but at this point who knows how flooded he is. He uses its effects to add the Hollow Man back to hand that I trashed really early in the game, and his ability to start scoring out just got amplified massively. I know it's time for me to start thinking about pulling the trigger. We haven't drawn any environmental testings this game, and look at how much hardware is on the table, so our money has been extremely pressed, but we also haven't drawn any events. Fortunately, Nuka draws me into Gamble Gamble Creative Commission, and I'm able to actually economically bounce back. Lander polishes off another Charlotte and jams what I'm almost certain is another 5-3 and a Hollow Man behind ice. After Nuka drawing some cards, I run R&D to find out what some ice is to figure out if I can pull off the combo yet. It ends up being an Aket, which after some deliberation I bounce off of. It's 4 credits for me to run the server effectively, but right now I'm just too poor to make 4 credit runs work with pulling off the combo. As predicted, Lander Hollow Man's out an SDS drone deployment and uses it to block my Coalescence. This trash primes my Simul chips, and I decide it's time to pull off the combo. First chip brings out Conduit. Click 1, we run R&D, and we use Arisana to muse out a Pishasaur. This cracks my environmental testing, and I'm running for 4 credits. It's time to see how many cards we can see and whether or not we can win the game. Run 1, Access 1, we hit a KPI. Run 2, Access 2, we see a hedge fund. Run 3, Access 3, we hit an SDS drone deployment, stealing it by trashing our Azamat. Run 4, Accesses 4 and 5, we see a hammer, followed by a measured response that we trash to go deeper. Run 5, Accesses 6 and 7, we see a KPI, followed by Basalt Spire for game. Now we go into game 3, our first game against Knight from Chess, who's playing Leo. They mull and I keep. She opens Ice credit. I open draw, Sure Gamble Creative Commission, and on my next turn, draw, double environmental testing, pulling a very slow opening and giving Knight from Chess plenty of time to get set up, but hopefully positioning myself to be sat on a giant pile of money when it comes time to pull the trigger on the combo. I keep playing setup, and eventually Knight from Chess is able to triple advance out a Luminal Transubstantiation, giving them an initial tempo advantage and helping them get set up. Eventually, after a bit more setup and prodding all the servers, we're able to pull off an Illumination that pushes us over the edge and manages to crack those 18 credits, as well as getting us most of our board set up. And to sweeten the deal, we grab a send a message off the top of the deck. And with presumably only a Boomy on HQ, KFC declines the res. KFC Seamless Launch never advances out of vulnerability audit, going to game point and forcing me to pull the trigger. Fortunately, if there's no cards you care about in your opponent's archives, you can just let Drafter's First Sub fire over and over again, so there's not actually any ice on R&D other than something that gives me +1 click when I get a Pishasaur on it. Running to muse out the Fazaram and then Simulchip flickering the muse to grab the Conduit. We're breaking the Drafter's install sub with the Slap Vandal every run to prevent that Bran in the bin from getting put back on the table on R&D. Run 1, Access 1, we hit a send a message, stealing it. Run 2, Access 2 is a Petty Cash, which stays. Access 3 is Hagen, and we run back for another credit. Run 3, Access 4 is Hedge. Run 4, Access 5 is Spin Doctor. Run 5, Access 6 is MIC, and Access 7 is another Spin Doctor that we trash. And Run 6, Access 8 completes the deep dive by grabbing us the sender message that wins the game. We swap sides, and now she's playing Reglat. I open with a Nano Management and a Pivot in hand, so my combo setup should be pretty quick, as well as a Mavirus or a Maskarovka to prime it off of. But unfortunately, by the time I can assemble it, she has 2 copies of Stoneship Chart Room on the table, and eventually they overclock HQ, cupulating my Nano Management and pretty much locking me out of the game. After that, my camera ran out of power, and so I don't have the rest of the game captured, but it went exactly how you would expect. She was able to grab 7 points just touching cards, and I wasn't able to rebuild the combo. Our next games are against Diamond playing RH Glacier. We'll skip over the first game because I managed to slam into some nasty ice and immediately steal my way into a flatline. In game 2, Diamond opens with ice on HQ and Archives, followed by a Hansei review to money up and prime RH. I respond with triple draw into Illumination for an extremely fast setup, hitting down an environmental testing and half popping it with a Coalescence and an Azamat, and accessing and trashing a Lacosta off the top to try and slow down the RH early game. Diamond spins and draws twice. I think she's playing through Flood and just trying to get the agendas in the bin, but fortunately for me this leaves R&D open for another turn of draws into Illumination. So we spec the Coal into draw Illumination. I get down a Coalescence, a Poison Vial and a Simulchip, cracking my environmental testing. And we see a Hedge Fund on the top of the deck. Diamond sets up some kind of remote play, and I follow up with triple draw into Illumination. On the way in, we SMC out a Conduit, detecting that she might be pretty lice on ice, and seeing if we can just get things going before she's able to adequately defend herself. We put down a DZMZ and a Simulchip. We decline the third install to make sure we have 2 cards in hand and can survive touching a Fuji, which is exactly what we do. Diamond finally ices R&D and pushes in the remote. I'm assuming it's a Charlotte Lacosta trying to get that early economic engine going, but it could easily be a clearinghouse or an agenda push. We do have a Poison Vial on the table, so we could try and pursue touching it if we want, but I'm guessing at this point, with many upgrades on it, one of them is likely a Managama or an Anoetic, and I'm not ready to pay that tax yet. I draw 4 cards to refill my hand, and it's revealed that it was a Charlotte Lacosta push, just getting the money engine online. Over the next few turns, Diamond gets down some more ice and I play Setup Runner for a bit, until eventually Diamond cracks the Charlotte and pushes something else in the remote. I play some more Setup Runner, hoping we can set up the Conduit loop in a couple turns' time, and Diamond scores out a Fuji. I do some more setup and Diamond responds by pushing another card. At this point I need to start thinking about how I'm going to pull the trigger. And so on Diamond's turn I use Q-Loop to install a Muse from the top of the deck, putting a Pisha Saw onto the outermost piece of ice. Run number 1, Diamond reses Empiricist. I chip out a Slap Vandal and we're breaking it for a credit and a Poison Vial counter. The next piece of ice is Vampiranasa, which I answer with a Fazarm from hand, meaning our total cost to run is 5 credits and a Poison Vial counter. At this point we realised I hadn't taken my Q-Loop information, and if I had I could have gotten a slap off the Q-Loop instead of using a Simul chip to reset a Muse to grab one from my bin. So we revert the game state in order to fix that, and then I access Spin Doctor on the top of the deck, which I trash. Access 2 is Lacosta Grid, which we do the same to. Click 2, run 2, 5 credits and a Poison Vial counter. Access 3 is Send a Message, which we steal. Access 4 is a Hansei Review. Access 5 is an Anoetic Void that we trash for 1. Click 3, run 3, 5 money on my final Poison Vial counter. We're seeing 3 new cards. Access 6 is an Anoetic Void that we trash for our final credit. Access 7 is a Bite. And Access 8 is a Charlotte. Click 4 is Draw, click 5 is Credit, click 6 is Run 4. We break 2 damage on the Empiricist, taking 1 damage and a tag, and then we take 2 more damage from the Vampiranasa, emptying our hand, and we have no credits to lose to it. Diamond doesn't draw any cards through this process to preserve as much loss as possible, and we're seeing new cards. And Access 9 is the Fuji asset retrieval that wins us the game. My final opponent for the practice session is Dave C, who's playing Corp. The first significant moment of the game happens a fair ways in after we've both been playing setup for a while. I run archives in order to force 2 spins on the table off the table and shuffle back what I believe to be 4 actual agendas, as it seems like Dave C's been playing through Flood. Unfortunately, this ends up with me picking up a Nightmare Archives, but what can you do versus Corp. The whole reason I made the run to force the spins was to get the agendas back in deck, so that I might touch one on this Illumination. I decide that against Corp. My main game plan is to touch the Ontos before they do, so even though this is my final click this turn, I figure now's as good as time as any to get the Conduit on the table and start figuring out how I'm going to win. I find a Jupstad grid and trash it, hoping we can slow down Corp. Grinder plan to get me to enough core damage that they can start wheeling Ontos. The next turn he fires off Big Deal Salvo, meaning that the game is afoot and it's time for me to start winning. In pursuit of that, I spec work off my Coalescence and then run the remote, using Arasana to Muse from hand for Pisha Saw from deck, having Pisha Saw overinstall the Muse, and then using Simul chip to return the Muse in order to play my Fazarm Entangler from grip. We're now making 2 credit R&D runs in order to grind on that Conduit. Click 2, run 1, access 1. We see Corporate Hospitality and trash it. Access 2 is another Corporate Hospitality and another trash. Click 3, run 2. Access 3 is an Elevagar which we steal. Access 4 is a Jupestad that we trash. And Access 5 is a Scatterfield. Click 4, run 3. Access 6 is a Big Deal that we trash. Access 7 is another Scatterfield. And Access 8 is a Tattoo Bowler. Click 5, run 4. Access 9 is a red level clearance. And Access 10 is a Scatterfield. Last click is a Creative Commission because we were pretty unlucky in how much we found there. Dave C spends his next turn getting more ice on R&D, which means we're going to find more money and more breakers in order to continue this. We spend a turn getting set up, and then we get predictably purged out, which means now I have to wait for lock to expire and get my Fazarm back on the table. After a few more turns of both of us getting set up, I run the HQ Ice first click in order to drain some credits, bouncing off a Scatterfield, and then run back on R&D ready to do this all again. The outermost is unfortunately a Tattoo Bowler, which I need to bounce off of because I'm not in position to not have that go back to hand and eat my Slap Vandal just yet. And so I go back to playing Setup Shaper. Predictably, a few turns later an Elevagal gets scored and I take a core damage. And now with 2 core damage, I know it's finally time for me to put my foot down, get back into R&D, and win the game before those Ontos show up and lose it for me. Unfortunately, we're not quite ready to pull the trigger, so I do one more turn of setup first. That turn of setup causes me to get shot in the head by a fast advanced Onto, but this does leave Dave on low credits, and thus not able to res the rest of the ice on R&D, so it's time to go. Click 1, install Simul chip, and then it's click 2, run 1. Chip out a Hosh on top of the Tattoo Bowler and break it for 1. He reses Drafter, and at this point I do the evaluation and I decide that I can just let both Drafters fire. On 0 credits, there's nothing he could install that would actually impact me, and this is the final turn of the game anyway, so it doesn't matter if he adds his entire discard pile back to his hand over the course of this turn. We use a Simul chip to get a Pisha Saw back on the table. Access 1 is an Onto that we steal. Click 3, run 2, 1 credit for the Tattoo and letting the Drafters fire. Access 2 is red level clearance. Access 3 is Hedge Fund. Click 4, we play Illumination to get another counter on the Conduit and get Pisha Saw back down. Click 5, we have to take a credit. And then click 6, we send our final Conduit run, and we access a Tattoo Bowler, followed by an Onto which we steal, which unfortunately is not enough for the game. We needed a salvo there, and we do not have the credits to go back, so we just money up last click. At this point, the recording cuts out, but we're fully out of gas in the tank, and all Dave did was overinstall all of R&D with a single Tattoo Bowler, wiping out my Slap Vandal, and with no muses and no chips left, eventually he would be able to build lock and win the game, so I concede. With that final round of in-person practice over, we all went out to Wendy's to have a meal before packing up for the evening. When I get home, I make a small deck change to my runner deck, cutting an air blades to add a Gauss and an environmental testing, and then I'm off to bed until the tournament the next day. Round 1, I'm playing runner against Ulyssosaurus on the Zwicky group. They open Ice Ice Hedge, and knowing that Wayland Ice can't really do anything too bad to you in the early game, as long as you don't have any programs installed, I slam into both of them, forcing a res on Winchester and Maskarovka, and setting them back economically. Both of us play setup until turn 4 when an asset gets jammed behind a piece of ice and I can test it, slapping through a tree line, trashing the anthill behind it, and giving me server lock until some more ice comes down or the tree line gets to strength 7. Ulyssosaurus responds by jamming and expending a tree line to get it to strength 7. And while this makes me unable to contest, it also puts Ulyssosaurus down on a very low credit total where they're unable to effectively score out whatever it is they've jammed. This lets me play setup until turn 7 when they finally advance the card in the remote, at which point I'm able to find a Hosh to get in and steal an off-world office. Flooding up, and I think hoping I won't check a card placed on the table, as I hadn't previously been contesting spins, Ulyssosaurus throws an above the law on the table, which I promptly check and steal. A face-down petty cash in the bin could hypothetically get them to double measured, but I don't see a way they can get to triple measured, and so I'm happy to sit on my 13 credits. I get to play setup until turn 10, when, in response to what looks like a push behind ice, I decide to pull the trigger on our combo. I pre-install Slap Vandal and Pishasaur, and then run. I use Prognostic Q-Loop to get down a Muse from the top of my deck, and install a Conduit on that. Click 3 access 1 is a Maskarovka, and click 4 access 2 is an Anthill. I decide not to trash it so that I can click for credits and get back up to 8, protecting me from the possibility of a double measured. Ulyssosaurus throws another piece of ice on top of R&D, but with another Slap Vandal in hand and 2 Poison Vials on the table, this poses no issue. Click 1 is Nuka, and click 2 is Illumination. I slap through both Maskarovkas and get Pishasaur and Env testing on the table, and then trash a Hollow Man off the top of the deck. Click 4 is Nuka, and click 5 I Conduit back on R&D. The third card down is an SDS drone deployment that wins me the game. Going into game 2 against Why Not, I keep a hand with money, a spin, and one of our combo pieces, but nothing super interesting happens until later in the game once I have the full combo assembled. On turn 7, I pivot to grab the Nano Management, completing the combo, and ice my Spin Doctor. They end up running Archive, forcing me to crack the Spin Doctor to prevent 6 points from bleeding out, and not giving me the res. Fortunately for me, not being familiar with the combo deck, after disarming me they run R&D, priming my combo again. At this point I'm fully set up to combo, and the only way it can go wrong is if I draw a Wage Workers off the top of the deck, as I don't yet have a resed 4 in order to shoot at the Bass as an alternate line. And, lo and behold, I draw the 1 in 30 worst possible draw. At this point my game plan changes to getting a resed 4, but I haven't even drawn one yet, and before I would be able to get one set up, Bass Chiraboga ends up being trashed, bringing my entire game plan around to trying to land a mad 6. By the time I have 6 pieces of ice res, I've bled out 5 points, and on the turn after I'm mad, another Devadatta hits the table, and with that many accesses, Why Not is able to find an agenda and win the game. Round 3 against Krusty, they mull, I keep, and I'm allowed to play Setup and Control Shaper until turn 6 when they play a pivot for a Nano Management and reveal that they're on Mad Ob. Fortunately, playing this deck myself, I'm familiar with the combos and know when I'm in danger of the combo, making sure I never let them have a resed 3 available or a face down card on the table that could be a pre-installed Wage Workers or a 3. I'm able to stall out the game for a few more turns until they jam something that I'm convinced is probably their combo setup. At this point I pull the trigger and we're sending it R&D. 1 is Nuka, 2 is Gauss popping to environmental testings, 3 is Illumination, 2 credits for Kessleroid, and they don't res because they know I could chip out of Azarum. We get down Conduit, DZ, and Pishasaur, access 1 is Maskarovka. Run back, access 2 is Above the Law. Run back, access 3 is SDS Drone Deployment, 4 is Wage Workers. Run back, Ari out Pishasaur, access 5 is Basalt for the win. For round 4 I'm against Lemem on 71 card Topan, which means I basically just need to get the combo down before they find their steel skins, or any Stoneship chart rooms that are in the deck to set up bling nonsense. I keep a hand with 2 pivots and some ice and some money, knowing that this is going to get me there about as quickly as anything else will. First key moment hits on turn 4 where they raindrops R&D and trash a Nano Management. Fortunately I have a Regolith on the table and an Extract in hand, which means I know I can ladder from Regolith into Tithe and Tithe into Spin Doctor to get it back in the deck. I draw into Wage Workers, but that's fine, I can jam it, they'll go trash it for me, and then when I spin back the Nano Management I can put the Wage back in too. I spin back my key cards and pivot for the Nano Management, and another pivot and a resed Spin Doctor later, and I have the whole combo in hand ready to go. Lemem gets down their full rig, fire bans R&D, uses Simulchip to put a Gourmand back on the table, and trashes one of my end of the lines, taking away the combo I'd set up, but fortunately I just draw into another end of the line, and with only one Stoneship on the table and no steel skins in hand, their fate is sealed. For round 5, I'm running against Okdoko, who's on some form of rig shooter ob, though I don't know that yet. I start the game by poking the remote into an illumination setup, and Okdoku sets up wall-to-wall cooking a logjam that's going to be a big problem for me later. A few turns of setup later, on turn 6, Okdoku overinstalls the wall-to-wall with what I assume to be an agenda push. I decide to completely ignore it and play setup, and while I'm risking getting my environmental testing eaten by an above the law, in my head I'm expecting an as-F, and I'm completely okay with Okdoku going to 2 points just to chip some damage out of my hand. But a Maverus gets turned into a Hollow Man, which pushes out an off-world office. Now, this could have been a lot worse for me if it was a Basalt Spire, and all things being as they are, it's not the worst possible result. Follow-up jam forces me to consider running the server though, otherwise I'm just going to lose to agendas being wheeled through the remote. I use Arasana to slap Vial through the Kessleroid, and then I use Simulchip to move the Slap Vandal onto Half-Run, breaking in and stealing an SDS over my Coalescence, as well as taking out the Hollow Man and slowing down the tempo of the game to buy myself some more turns to get set up. I decide to poke R&D and learn that it's a giant Logjam 8, which means I'm going to need to figure out getting my Hush back on the table. On turn 10, they ob-tutor a Managarm off an Anthill, and IAA on top of it. I contest with Muse Gauss and slapping through the Afshar, but I'm eventually bounced off the half-run by a Zato City Grid. The SDS score takes out my Muse Gauss, and now I'm really running out of ways to get that Hush back on top of R&D. It's combo turn, 1 is Nuka, 2 is Muse Gauss, 3 is Illumination, Q-Loop install Simulchip into Hush, Illuminate Conduit Pishasword Dr. Nuka into Steal Offworld Office off Access 1. Click 4, Access 2 Stavka, Access 3 Maskarovka, click 5, Access 4 Anthill, Trash, click 5, Access 6 Off the Books, Win. Round 6, I'm against Sea Scorched or MuslihaT. I keep 2 combo pieces, Ice and no money, and they keep as well. They get both Twinning and Jezva to hit the table in turn 1, which means I know the clock I'm on is extremely short and I need to play pretty fast. In pursuit of this, I end up throwing out an SDS drone deployment to try and keep my hand as flexible as possible, and they immediately run and steal it. This will at least slow them down getting out their twinning charges. Unfortunately for me, they punish by reprising off my only res dice into Transfer of Wealth, completely crippling my economy. A few turns later and I've finally rebuilt my economy, but they get down Jezva and Twinning. They run HQ to get me to res, but don't end up sweeping my hand, keeping their twinning charges back. The next turn they come back and do decide to sweep, stealing my Basalt Spire and then reprising off all of my res dice. This is economically terrible for me, but at this point I do have the full combo in hand and just need to get the 14 credit threshold and a res 3 or 4 cost. Fortunately, they spent all their twinning counters sweeping my hand twice that turn, which gives me some time to get set back up on the board and hopefully get things resed again before I need to score out the above the law to blow up the twinning. I declined to res the Anthill, not wanting to draw too many cards and risk drawing into Bass or Wage Workers, and score out the above the law to blow up the twinning. I'm hoping that they think it's a face down Spin Doctor and have decided it's not worth checking. Unfortunately, I drew the Bass anyway and they immediately contest off the Anthill. We're still just trying to reach 14 credits and a res 3 cost so that we can combo out before they manage to touch all of the agendas. Comboed with the fact that we've had resed ice reprised off 3 times and been transferred once is not making reaching that end state easy. They put down a backup twinning and run R&D, getting 1 counter off of Jezva, and see 2 cards, one of which is an SDS drone deployment which ends the game. In round 7, I'm against Nopius on Hashiko. I keep combo pieces and money, they keep as well. I draw Bass right off the top of the deck, but with a Wage Worker still in the deck, I'm not worried. By turn 3, I've drawn into the full combo and just need another turn to pivot for nano management and then 1 more to pull off the kill, making sure I have enough money and the requisite resed cards. Fortunately, I have an Anthill in my hand that can serve as a resed 3 to fetch the Wage Workers. So on turn 4, I pivot for nano management, giving me full combo, and on turn 5, I jam the Anthill. Going into turn 6, I'm ready to pull the combo, but they have 2 steel skins in hand. To win, I need one of those steel skins to be one of the 4 cards I don't hit, giving me a 40% chance of success, which luckily I land. Even if I didn't, it's early enough in the game that I can probably set up the combo or some later variant of it again, and with 2 steel skins gone, it'll be much easier to follow through. For round 8, I'm running against Leah Dahlia on Leo. Arasana into Leo is an extremely cooked matchup, so I don't fancy my chances. We both keep. I money up on turn 1. On turn 2, I poke a Bran. Then I draw into Illumination, getting down Nuka, Poison Vial, and Coalescence. They seamless advance and score a Luminal, and then install and crack a Humanoid, giving an absolutely massive tempo swing in their favour. I slap Vial to contest the remote, taking out the Mercia. Do some setup, and then contest again, taking out Mercia Anoetic. I figure we're 18 cards deep and that felt like them setting up a push, so I check HQ and find nothing. After some more setup runner to recover, they jam what I assume is an agenda and I figure I actually need to start playing the game. Click 1 is Nuka, click 2 is Illumination. I slap through the Hagen. I let the Hagen trash a slap, knowing it's not going to matter, and use a chip to bring out Coalescence, giving me the money for my play. Illumination brings out Cole, Gauss, and Muse Conduit. Access 1 is Seamless Launch. I chip out SMC to grab Pishasaur, and it's off to the races. Click 3, access 2 is Boomy. Click 4, access 3 is Tranquility. Click 5, access 4 is Petty Cash. And I'm out of gas, so need to play Setup Runner for a few more turns, during which they score a Sam, resing a Mike on R&D and purge me out. On turn 13, they finally jam what I assume to be the game-winning agenda, and I feel set up enough to actually try the combo again. I start by chipping out a Fazarm on the MIC, but I realise spending 3 credits every run is going to be way too expensive, and I need to use Slap Vials instead. Click 1, Muse resets Gauss. Click 2, Illumination. Slap Vialing MIC. Illumination installs Pishasaur. And access 1 is a Spin Doctor that I trash. Click 3, access 2 is Hagen. Access 3 is Humanoid trashed. Click 4, access 4 and 5 are both Vulnerability Audit. Click 5, access 6 is Boomy. Access 7 is MIC. Access 8 is Bran. And I can't afford to go back for more. If I hadn't wasted a chip on the Fazarm, I could chip out a Coal and go back for one more run. And I needed to go 2 deeper than I did, not 1 deeper, in order to actually hit the Sam and win the game. For round 9, I'm playing Ob versus Tondo and MuslihaT, and I keep combo and money. We both play setup with Tondo pinholing off my Regolith, trying to keep my money down, as I slowly ice everything. I tank a transfer of wealth, but my economic situation is overall still looking fine. I draw into Wage Workers, but I already have a spin ready to get it back in the deck with. A few more turns of setup on both sides, and I need another transfer of wealth. This one's much more impactful, as even though I tutor out a Regolith, Tondo's able to trash it, and I'm clicking for credits. A few turns later, I'm back in the money and a twinning hits the table. And we're basically playing a game of will I find my final combo pieces before Tondo finds the agendas. One more end of the line drawn, and now we're just in the nano management or pivot waiting room. Twinning finally finds an above the law on my deck. A few turns later, and another big twinning dig finds a Basalt Spire, and my nano management finally shows off my mandatory draw. Unfortunately, I'm slightly too poor to use it, so I hedge fund up and hope that R&D holds for one more turn. At this point, with only 16 cards left in the deck and most of them being agendas, I'm on about a 70% chance to lose as they sweep the next 3 cards. Fortunately for me, R&D holds, and 1 turn later I'm able to pull off the Bass combo line in order to kill the runner. And finally for round 10, I'm running against Tradon playing Alco. He opens triple install, I draw a load with Nuka, but it's all offense, which means my illumination isn't that impressive in the grand scheme of things. I lose Pishasaur to Bladderwort, and our first FUT of the game hits the table. I have to take the turn off for economic recovery, and 1 moon-pooled false lead later, I'm losing Hosh and environmental testing to FUT damage. I trash the FUT and draw up, making sure to economically recover, and Tradon responds by pushing behind ice. After some more drawing, to make sure I don't just die, I run the remote, losing UAV and illumination to an anemone res. Q-Loop grabs me a Muse, which grabs me a slap through the 3rd damage, and I steal a Fuji, which hits a DZ and an environmental testing. Tradon pushes a new FUT behind ice, and all I can do is draw up in response. He then throws 2 more cards on the table. I run Archives to try and mitigate whatever damage the cohorts can do, and throw Hush on the assumed anemone, stealing a false lead, and losing Poison Vial, and Coal to FUT. I figure at this point the only way I'm going to win is stealing a Fuji out of HQ, so check it. And my opponent finishes me off by using Cohort, Moonpool, and some clicks to advance to score a See How They Run, hitting me for 2 damage. With the final round of Swiss over, I finish on a record of 6 wins and 4 losses. Bubble for the cut ended up being X and 3, so a slightly better performance and I might have made it. But overall, I was more than happy to take 46th, coming in the top 25% of attendees. Unfortunately, this led me to a very important realization. As much as I love playing Arisana, the matchup into Leo is just too bad to justify bringing her to Worlds. In addition to that, I don't think I can play a runner deck at a high enough win rate against Leo that I can bring anything other than a Corp deck that has a chance at getting a 100% win rate. Due to the nature of combo ob, you're just going to brick some games, or your opponent is going to have stone ships or steel skins, and the combo isn't going to land. Which means I need to bring a more consistent deck on my Corp side, one that I think might be able to go undefeated, and I need to switch my runner into one that doesn't have such a fundamentally losing matchup into what's likely to be the most common Corp deck at the event. But if you want to find out what decks I end up playing for Worlds, you'll either have to see me there this weekend, or tune in to our next tournament report video. If you can't make it out to Worlds and you want to participate in a similar online event like this one, then in January 2026, Man in the Moon will be hosting the New Year's Showdown, the next large competitive event open for anyone who wants to participate. On screen right now, you can see an exclusive look at some new art that's going to be available during that tournament. Thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It really does help the channel out, and I'll see you in the next one.